felicitation for him much later in his life, I think in the 1940s or 50s, where somebody comes and tells him that, we don't like the Savarkar of today, the Hindutva ideologue. We like the Savarkar 30 years ago when you were, writing those fiery speeches and also throwing bombs and bomb manuals and plotting political assassinations. We don't like you now. So Savarkar listens to that and says, it took you 30 years to understand and appreciate me of that era. It will take you another 50 years to understand what I stand for now. So I think in his own writings, he writes this very candidly, saying, a lot of what he said, what he conceptualized was what India actually fructified to become later. In my view, the political direction that India took in terms of her military strength, whether it's her foreign policy, her national security, her economic policy, all of that I feel is a vision of Savarkar coming true, but still somehow he's of course not acknowledged by that, even by the Indian political right.
Then what is this vision of Savarkar you're talking about? When talking about Hindutva, what is the origin and meaning of Hindutva per se? I mean, how did Savarkar see it?
That's an interesting question, and considering, in a place like Mangalore, it's all the more relevant, where we discuss what were the origins. Why did this concept of Hindutva come about? So it was a slim little book that he wrote from the confines of the Ratnagiri prison in 1923 called Essentials of Hindutva. And if you see, he wrote all his other books in Marathi, but this was the only book that he wrote in English. So it was very obvious that he was targeting a pan-India audience who had to read it. And what was the message that he was trying to convey? I think this was the time when, in my personal view, the most pernicious intrusion of religion in politics was happening. The seeds of our country's partition were being sown at that time, and that was the Khilafat agitation which Mahatma Gandhi had started. Of course, as they say, the road to hell is always paved with good intentions. Probably Gandhi's intentions were good, of bringing Hindus and Muslims together and Muslims into the freedom struggle. But then the way it was structured, and for those who may not know about the Khilafat, here was communal mobilization of an entire community for the restoration of a caliphate thousands of kilometers away in Turkey. Now, the British had actually won Turkey in war, in the First World War. They had dispossessed the Sultan, the Caliph of Turkey. The people of Turkey did not want him as their Caliph. Mustafa Kemal Ataturk came in later. But then here was Gandhi telling the Muslims of India that in 1 year, if you come and join me, we will establish the Caliphate there in Turkey. And in 1 year, I will give you all Swaraj. So these were the twin promises that were made at that time. Now, the British, you just see the logic of it. It was so illogical. The British were not obliged to, concede to the demands of a colony, and that too when they won that place in war. And you had Shaukat Ali, Muhammad Ali, all these very, very disturbing elements who were co-opted into the struggle. And Swami Shraddhanand also writes in his memoirs that on stage, Maulana Shaukat Ali and Muhammad Ali are reciting ayats from the Quran which talk about jihad and killing kafirs, and Gandhi is listening to this as a non-violent Masiha. And when Shraddhanand talks about it to Gandhi, he says, no, they are talking about the British, so let's not worry about it. So this constant pandering and appeasement which started then, and when those twin promises that he made of establishing Khilafat and also Swaraj within 1 year did not materialize, when you mobilize a group on communal basis, when the promise is not met, you don't know how the mob turns. It can go on a rampage. We saw that at Ayodhya, we see that all the time. So the same thing happened with the mobilized Muslim groups. You had in neighboring Malabar, in Kerala, you had the Mopla carnage where millions and thousands of Nayars were killed in broad daylight. Women were molested and raped and killed. And to all this, Gandhi's response was they were the brave Moplas who are protecting their religion and so on. So almost appeasing that. A few years later, when Swami Shraddhanand is murdered by Abdul Rashid, a Muslim fanatic, Gandhi says, I don't even consider him as an assassin. He's my dear brother, Abdul Rashid, and we must get into the psyche of the assassin. We must understand, we should not have anger. But then Gandhians do not consider Godse as my dear brother Godse anyway, which happened two decades later, very unfortunate, heinous crime nonetheless. So So all this that was going on, and that whole of the 1920s, if you see, even British records, where the Viceroy and others, right, before there used to be riots only during Muharram, Bakrid, Ganesh Chaturthi and all these festivals, but all through the 1920s you had communal riots and carnages and genocides across India. And on whom did that albatross lie? It lay on this entire concept of communal mobilization which Gandhi started. And so there needed to be somebody from this side of the spectrum who gave an intellectual answer to that, and that was precisely what Savarkar did. And I always keep saying that the English book, Essentials of Hindutva, was his first intellectual salvo against Mahatma Gandhi, with whom he had a running feud, ideological feud all his life. And there he defines, in the very first preface, he says, my Hindutva has nothing to do with Hinduism or the theological aspects of the religion. He was anti-caste, anti-ritual, an atheist of sorts. So he did not care much about the religion, so to say. So he says it is a cultural and an nationalistic marker. Who is a Hindu? Anybody, Asindhu, Sindhu Paryanta, whoever is there within, from the Indus to the oceans, everybody who considers this mass of land as their Pitru Bhumi, or the land of their forefathers, and also their Punya Bhumi, one which is holy land, not in the context of religion, but something that they revere, they are dedicated towards, that person is a Hindu. He could be Muslim, Christian, Jain, Parsi, Sikh, whatever, but then he's still identified by this cultural marker of being a Hindu. And he says the same DNA is there in all of us, whether it is a Brahmin, it's a Nayar, it's a tribal community in Andamans or wherever else. We all have the same blood, we all have the same forefathers. So intercaste marriages, intercaste dining, all this should come very naturally. So his Hindutva that he conceptualized was one that unified Hindu society, brought all the communities together, and as I said, it was an intellectual answer that he had to provide to this very, very dangerous political game that was being played in India.